On a stormy night in Boston, as crowds rushed past with umbrellas and cold hearts, a man named Martin sat invisible against the wall, broken by life and forgotten by the world, until a child with a yellow umbrella stopped, and what happened next would change everything. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The rain fell hard on the streets of Boston, drumming against rooftops and bouncing off the crowded sidewalks. Neon lights blurred across wet pavement, creating shimmering rivers of red, blue, and yellow. People hurried past with umbrellas tilted low, collars pulled up, and hoods drawn tight. For most, the storm was only an inconvenience, another obstacle on a busy evening. But for Martin, it was something heavier. He sat slumped against the cold brick wall of an old bookstore. His clothes were thin and torn, clinging to his body like a second skin. His shoes were worn down, the soles cracked, water seeping inside until his socks were soaked through. Martin's knees were tucked close to his chest, his arms wrapped tightly as though trying to hold in the last bit of warmth he had left. He watched the crowd blur past him. Men in dark coats carried briefcases. Women in heels stepped quickly through puddles. Couples leaned closer beneath umbrellas, careful not to brush against him. No one stopped. No one even glanced his way. To them, he was not a man. He was part of the city's background, a shadow against the wall, another forgotten figure swallowed by the rain. Martin lowered his head. Shame pressed heavy on his shoulders. Not long ago, he had been different. He had worked with his hands, building wooden furniture in a small shop, proud of every table and chair he made. He once had a home, a place filled with laughter, and a family that gave him reason to keep going. But one loss led to another. First the job, then the home, then the family. The steady rhythm of life unraveled until he found himself here, drenched, hungry, and invisible. The storm only made the silence worse. Water dripped from his hair, his lips trembling from the cold. His stomach growled, but the ache was nothing compared to the emptiness of being unseen. People moved so quickly, faces lit by phones, eyes fixed on destinations. They walked around him as if he were nothing more than an obstacle in the road. And then, something unusual happened. The small sound of footsteps stopped directly in front of him. Not the hurried shuffle of business shoes or the sharp strike of heels, but something lighter, softer. Martin lifted his head slowly, expecting to see another passerby brushing water from their jacket. Instead, he saw a tiny pair of bright red shoes standing still in the rain. Above those shoes was a little girl, no more than 7 years old. She held a sunflower yellow umbrella, tilted forward so that it blocked the rain falling onto his face. Strands of her brown hair stuck to her cheeks, her eyes wide and curious. She was not rushing. She was not afraid to look at him. For a moment, Martin could not move. Months had passed without anyone truly seeing him. And now, here was a child, pausing in the storm, holding her umbrella, not for herself, but for him. The city noise seemed to fade around T. The rushing footsteps, the honking cars, the pounding rain, it all felt distant. What remained was the quiet moment between a weary man and a child who dared to stop. Martin's throat tightened. His voice was rough, nearly lost from disuse, but he managed to whisper, "Why are you standing here?" The girl tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. She did not step back. She did not hurry away. She simply smiled softly, her umbrella steady in her small hand. In that instant, the storm felt different. The cold did not bite as sharply. The weight on his chest lightened, if only a little, because for the first time in a long time, someone had noticed, Someone had not walked away. Martin could not yet understand what this pause in the rain would mean for his life. But deep down, he knew one thing with certainty. The world was still capable of surprising him, and it all began with a child's shoes, a yellow umbrella, and the courage to stop when no one else would. Lucy walked a few steps behind her daughter, guiding her through the crowded sidewalk with a firm grip on the strap of a shopping bag. Her black umbrella shielded them both, though the wind pushed rain sideways and soaked the edges of her coat. She was used to these walks through the city, fast-paced, eyes forward, no stopping. It was how everyone survived the storm. But when she glanced down, she realized Clara was no longer walking beside her. Her heart jumped. In the rush of people, she spotted Clara just a few feet ahead, standing perfectly still in front of the man slumped against the wall. Lucy's first reaction was fear. She hurried forward, her pulse quickening. Strangers in the city could be dangerous, and she had been told countless times not to get too close. "Clara," she called, her voice low but sharp. "Come back here." But Clara did not move. She stood with her sunflower yellow umbrella tilted forward, shielding the man from the rain. Her small shoes planted firmly on the wet sidewalk. Lucy reached her daughter and placed a hand on her shoulder, ready to pull her away. But then she looked at the man. His clothes clung to him, soaked through. His eyes were tired, filled with something deeper than exhaustion, and his lips trembled as if words had been lost in the storm long before she arrived. Lucy hesitated. Part of her wanted to step back, to keep walking like everyone else. It was safer. It was easier. It was what she had done before. But the sight of her daughter standing there with such quiet courage made her pause. Martin's voice cracked as he whispered, "Why would she stop for me?" Clara lifted her chin slightly, her answer simple. "Because I see you." The words struck Lucy harder than the cold rain. She felt guilt rise inside her, because she had walked past people like him many times before. She had told herself she was too busy, too tired, or that someone else would help. But now, seeing through Clara's eyes, she felt the weight of her own excuses. Martin tried to smile, but it faltered. His voice was rough as he admitted, "I haven't eaten since yesterday." Lucy froze. She had food in her bag, warm bread, roasted chicken, enough for her and Clara's dinner. For a moment, her thoughts fought with one another. Part of her wanted to hold on tightly to what she had, to protect her daughter and keep their evenings simple. But then she looked again at Martin. She saw the hunger in his face, the way his hands trembled, not only from the cold, but from emptiness. Slowly, Lucy reached into her bag and pulled out the paper sack. She held it out, her voice soft. "It's not much, but it might help." Martin stared at it, his hands shaking as he reached forward. The smell of bread and chicken escaped the bag, and his eyes filled with tears he could not hold back. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't deserve this." Before Lucy could answer, Clara frowned and said firmly, "Of course you do. Everybody deserves to eat." The simple truth in her daughter's words struck Lucy again. What she had been afraid to say, Clara spoke without hesitation. People on the sidewalk began to notice. Some slowed their pace, others shook their heads. One man muttered under his breath, disapproving, calling it foolish to encourage beggars. Lucy felt a fire rise inside her. She turned and met his glare. "It's called kindness," she said firmly. "You should try it." The man walked away, embarrassed. Lucy crouched slightly, so her umbrella overlapped with Clara's. She looked at Martin, her voice gentler now. "She has a big heart. I hope you don't mind." Martin shook his head. "Don't be sorry. She's the first person to stop." Those words carried weight. They revealed not just his pain, but the truth of how easily people can ignore another human being. Lucy swallowed hard, ashamed of how often she had done. The rain continued to fall, but the three of them stood together in a small circle of warmth, created not by shelter, but by choice. In that moment, Lucy realized something she had forgotten in the rush of daily life. Kindness is not complicated. It begins with stopping, with seeing, with allowing yourself to care. And tonight, it was her daughter, not herself, who had reminded her of that truth. The rain slowed as the night pressed on, but the chill in the air clung to Martin's skin. He sat silently, holding the warm paper bag that Lucy had given him. The bread inside filled the air with a comforting scent, one that stirred memories of home, of dinners shared long ago. He wanted to refuse, to give it back, but his hunger was stronger than his pride. Lucy stood quietly beside him, unsure what to say next. Clara, however, had no such hesitation. She crouched down, her sunflower yellow umbrella still tilted above Martin's shoulders, and asked softly, "Are you going to be okay?" Martin's throat tightened. He wanted to answer with certainty, but the truth weighed too heavy. "I don't know," he admitted. Lucy exchanged a glance with her daughter. She knew what she should do, what most people would do. Walk away, return home, and leave the man to his fate. But something inside her refused to turn back this time. She took a steady breath and said, "There's a shelter a few blocks away. We can walk with you, if you'd like." Martin's first instinct was suspicion. He had heard such promises before, only to be left behind at the last minute. Clara slipped her hand into Martin's, and for the first time in months, he felt the warmth of another human touch. When they reached the shelter, Martin hesitated at the doorway. The brick building loomed above him, its windows glowing with light. He had stood outside places like this before, unsure if he could bear the sting of rejection again. Clara squeezed his hand gently and whispered, "Go inside. You'll be safe." With that small encouragement, Martin stepped through the door. That night was different. For the first time in a long time, he slept indoors. He had a meal, a blanket, and 4 walls to block the storm. It was not much, but to Martin, it felt like a lifeline. The following week, Lucy and Clara returned. True to her word, Lucy brought bags filled with food and clean clothes. Martin was stunned. Most people offered kindness once and never came back. But here they were again, smiling at him like he mattered. Little by little, Martin began to trust. Lucy introduced him to a local community program that offered small carpentry jobs. The work was not glamorous, but when Martin held tools in his hands again, shaping wood into something useful, he felt dignity return to him, piece by piece. Clara visited often, her sunflower umbrella always in tow, even when the skies were clear. "Just in case," she'd say with a playful grin, making Martin laugh. In her presence, he did not feel invisible. He felt human again. Word of their friendship began to spread among the volunteers at the shelter. Some were inspired to spend more time talking with those they served, rather than just handing out meals. Others donated more, realizing how much small acts could ripple outward. One child's kindness had stirred something larger, reminding the city that compassion could be contagious. Martin still carried scars of his hardships. There were nights when old memories weighed heavily, and mornings when doubt crept in. But each time he saw Clara rushing up to greet him, each time he saw Lucy offer quiet encouragement, he was reminded that he was not alone anymore. The kindness of a single child had not only changed his day, it had begun to change his life. As spring inched closer, Martin grew stronger, healthier, and more determined. The storm that had once beaten him down now felt distant. He was learning to stand again, not just because of shelter or food, but because someone had reminded him that he still mattered. The ripple of kindness had begun, and it was spreading further than any of them could have imagined. Spring arrived in Boston with a gentle warmth that washed the city clean. The heavy rains gave way to softer skies, and sunlight spilled across the streets where months earlier storms had raged. For Martin, the change in season felt like more than just weather. It felt like a sign. He stood outside the shelter, dressed in a clean shirt and work trousers. His hair was trimmed, his shoulders no longer hunched in defeat. In his hands, he held a small wooden box, freshly polished, the grain of the oak shining in the light. It was the kind of work he used to do years ago, and now, thanks to the community program Lucy had connected him with, it was work he was doing again. Each day, Martin built something new. Tables, chairs, shelves, small pieces for local families who valued craftsmanship. His hands, once numb from the cold sidewalks, were steady again. Every nail he hammered, every surface he sanded, reminded him that he still had purpose. But what gave him the greatest strength was not the job. It was the promise that Lucy and Clara had kept. They continued to visit, week after week, never letting him sink back into invisibility. On one crisp afternoon, Martin waited by the shelter door, watching the street with anticipation. Soon he spotted them. Lucy walking gracefully with her black umbrella folded under her arm, and Clara running ahead with the same sunflower yellow umbrella, though there was not a single cloud in the sky. When Clara reached him, she grinned. "I brought it just in case." Martin laughed, the sound deep and genuine. He bent down, setting the wooden box carefully at his side, and opened his arms as Clara rushed in for a hug. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking, though he tried to steady it. Clara shook her head, smiling with the same innocence she had carried that rainy night. "No, I only shared my umbrella." But to Martin, it had been so much more. Lucy stepped forward, watching the exchange with quiet emotion. She remembered the hesitation she had felt the first time, the fear of stopping when everyone else kept walking. Now she knew that decision had changed more than one life, but had changed hers too. Martin picked up the wooden box and handed it to Clara. "I made this for you," he said softly. Clara opened it carefully. Inside was a small carved umbrella, smooth and shining, every detail etched with care. It was not just a gift, it was a symbol of the moment that had rewritten his story. "Thank you," Clara said, holding it close. Martin's eyes glistened. "No, thank you. You reminded me I was still worth something." The three of them walked together through the bustling street. People turned to look, not with the cold stares of before, but with curiosity and sometimes even smiles. The sight of the little girl holding hands with a man who had once been lost to the storm carried a quiet power. As they walked, Martin thought about the long nights when he had believed there was no way back. He had thought his story was over, that he was only a shadow left behind. But kindness had proved him wrong. A single act, a child pausing in the rain, had rippled outward until it brought him to this moment under the spring sun. Life was not suddenly perfect. There were still struggles ahead. But Martin was no longer alone. He had friends, work, and hope. And hope, he realized, was stronger than any storm. Lucy glanced at him as they turned a corner. "You've come a long way." Martin nodded, his voice firm. "And I won't go back. Not anymore." Clara swung her yellow umbrella playfully, her laughter rising above the noise of the city. It was the sound of possibility, of new beginnings. Together, they disappeared into the crowd, an unlikely trio bound not by blood, but by compassion. And so, the story closed not with the rain, but with the sun. A chapter of despair had ended, and a new one had begun, built on the truth that kindness, no matter how small, can change everything.